Okay, call the meeting to order, please. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Chapman, that the special meeting of the Council Township of Springwater of December 5th, 2019 come to order at 7 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest tonight? All right, thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder to call the public meeting to order, please? Councillor Cabral, Councillor Ritchie. That this public meeting of council held under section 26 sub 3 and sub 4 of the Planning Act for the official plan review be called to order at 7:01 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. Notice of the public meeting was published in a newspaper and other medium having general circulation in the township of Springwater on October 17, 2019, and circulated to all agencies, service providers, school boards, and abutting municipalities as prescribed in the Planning Act. The notice was recirculated 2 weeks after the original circulation in the newspaper, being October 31, 2019. This provided at least 30 days of notice from the second circulation for the public meeting as per section 26 sub 3 and 4 of the Planning Act. Additional notice was provided in the Springwater Link on November 14, 2019. The land subject to the official plan review is the entire geographic lands within the Township of Springwater. The purpose of the official plan review is to reflect the current and emerging values and growth management framework of the township and ensure it is consistent with provincial and county policies. To date, visioning sessions, including several workshops, were held, resulting in the preparation of a draft discussion paper and a draft growth management strategy. These documents have been available for review on the township website since August 2018. An open house was conducted by the township staff on November 14, 2019 to provide the public with the opportunity to obtain information regarding the draft documents and to make detail and to identify provincial and county policies that have come into effect since the last official plan update. The township has received comments from various organizations, businesses, and residents with respect to the Springwater official plan. Comments received to date relate to the following considerations: seasonal uses, agritourism, greenbelt policies, severance policies, and site-specific designation requests, site-specific policy changes, requests for settlement area boundary adjustments, and secondary plan area adjustments. Public meeting attendees have been provided an opportunity to register to speak and address council once called upon. If attendees have not registered to speak and would like to provide comments verbally, you will have an opportunity to do so once all of the registered speakers have provided their comments. When you speak, please come to the microphone, the front, that microphone over there, and clearly state your name and address so that your comments are correctly entered into the records for today's proceedings. You may also submit written comments by mail or email. Our Director of Planning, Brent Spagnol, will now provide a brief introduction, followed by a presentation by Chris Terrell from WSP, our consultants, who will provide further details and updates with respect to the official plan review.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think it's important to note that tonight represents the start of a very large and very important process for the Township of Springwater with respect to its official plan review, or official plan. Leading up to this point, as the Mayor has mentioned, there's been a number of sessions and sessions and information sessions and workshops to feed into the official plan review process. And from staff's perspective, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in those visioning sessions and workshops for providing your input and for coming to the meeting tonight. One thing I'd like to mention is that as far as the speaking order, there will be a speaking order list to which the Mayor will call individuals up in order to provide comments. And I'd like to turn the presentation or turn the evening over to Chris Terrell from WSP, who is representing the consulting firm who will be working on the official plan review process moving forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Make sure this is on. Okay, we'll try that again. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. My name's Chris Tyrell. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present you the work that's been completed to date in support of the township's official plan review. I will briefly add some additional commentary on the format and purpose of the meeting. I want to talk briefly about what is an official plan, why is it being reviewed at this stage. We'll provide an overview of our work program that's been completed to date, as well as anticipated next steps. I will review the draft growth management strategy and the draft discussion paper, and I will conclude with a summary of our next steps, or our recommended next steps for your consideration. So the meeting at this stage in the process is required under Section 26 of the Planning Act, and is to hold a special meeting of council to consider input and topics that need to be reflected upon or considered as council undertakes its review of the official plan. And leading into that, we have completed some background work on your behalf, as you said, has been available since August of 2018. My presentation will inform council and those in attendance of the work that has been completed to date, and some preliminary scoping of issues and some preliminary recommendations that we're providing at this point to guide next steps in the official plan. But first, what exactly is an official plan, and why are we reviewing it at this point? So the township's official plan is a policy document that guides the long-term growth and development and land use change within the township. And it needs to be updated. Your current base official plan is over 20 years old. It needs to be updated to conform to emerging provincial policies, changes to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the relatively recent, the 2016 County of Simcoe official plan. But furthermore, the official plan also needs to be updated to reflect changing issues within the township that have been discussed in the past through the visioning exercises that you mentioned, as well as our own work with township staff to review technical planning issues that will drive considerations of future policies in your plan. Our exercise to review the official plan began in 2016 with visioning workshops with the community. And in essence, that was an opportunity to discuss with the community values, how the community saw the township evolving over the course of the next 20 years, and to start to set some aspirations that would form the basis for goals and objectives and broad level policy to be considered in the official plan. And with that, we also completed a draft growth management strategy, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes, as well as a draft discussion paper. This meeting this evening will be very close to the end of the first phase of a two-phase study process. So the first phase we've called preparatory, which is the work that we've completed to date, including this meeting, and ultimately finalizing the discussion paper and the growth management strategy. And then we would move on to the second phase, which is to essentially draft the new official plan and complete certain background technical studies that would support the policies of the new official plan. And I'll talk more about the recommended next steps for phase 2 at the end of the presentation. So as I mentioned, we completed a draft growth management strategy, which is fundamental to helping to inform policies about growth management, policies about land use change and development for the next 20 years to 2031 within the township. The intent is to review population projections, to establish population projections, to look at how many dwellings are going to be needed in the township to accommodate that population, and as well to forecast the number of jobs that are going to be required or are going to be coming to the township over the course of the planning horizon. And with that in mind, we look at what we call a land budget, or how much land is going to be required to be developed to accommodate those jobs or accommodate those residents in the future. And those are fundamental considerations in the establishment of a new official plan for the township. We also look at matters such as how many units will be built within existing built-up areas versus how many will be result from outward expansion of settlement areas. And we look at the density of development that is predicted or may be required by provincial policy moving forward. And just to speak to the specific recommendations, our study found that the suggested population or the forecast population in 2031 would be around 37,800. That would require 12,700 dwelling units, and 11,800 jobs would be in the township. The growth management strategy goes on to provide a series of recommendations that will help to guide and inform policies for the new official plan. It suggests that no settlement area expansions will be required to accommodate that growth. In other words, there's sufficient designated land or committed development already within the township and within the settlement areas of the township to accommodate that population. And we're suggesting that you differentiate the settlement areas that exist across the township based upon their size, the range of uses and activities that are within each of those settlement areas, as well as the availability of services, both hard infrastructure as well as community services. We've suggested a range to look at diversifying the range of housing options that are available in the township. We've suggested that as part of our next phase of work, we should look at an intensification study. In other words, specifically, how many units would be accommodated within existing, new units would be accommodated within existing built-up areas, existing settlement areas within the township. We've suggested looking specifically at a Bayfield Street corridor study, focusing on Midhurst. We've suggested reviewing the non-residential land use designation provisions. We've suggested completing a population serving employment market study, and what we mean by that is what kind of services are going to be required in the township to accommodate the projected growth. What specific policies, what specific types of activities, what specific land is going to need to be made available to serve the growing population of the township. We've suggested there's a need to consider designating and protecting lands for employment, lands to accommodate jobs. And we need to work with the county through its ongoing municipal comprehensive review to look at targets for the density of development and targets for the percentage of new units that will be, again, within existing settlement areas, or the intensification target. We're also suggesting that growth management and growth in the township is something that you should monitor and reevaluate on an ongoing basis. And we're suggesting that you maintain the growth management model and update it a minimum of every 5 years. Our second major deliverable to date has been the discussion paper. And the intent of the discussion paper is to outline key issues, either from our perspective or that we heard through consultation with agencies, stakeholders, yourselves, your staff, or broadly the community through the visioning exercise. And these issues are matters that we're recommending to you be addressed through the development of the new official plan. So the document itself summarizes the input that was received through the visioning workshops that, as I said, were completed in and around 2016. It helps to develop a vision, guiding principles for the new official plan. In essence, to establish the aspirational goals and objectives that will help to define and shape the official plan. It also provided additional information about what additional background studies, additional work is going to be required to support the development of the policies of the official plan in phase 2 of this exercise. 7 key policy themes have emerged through that exercise, and they are enunciated in the draft discussion paper. So it speaks to developing complete and healthy communities, speaks to agriculture, environment, natural resources, conserving cultural heritage, community services, facilities, and amenities that are available within the township, promoting economic development, and sustainable infrastructure. And I'll briefly touch on all 7 of those themes in my presentation now. So first, on healthy and complete communities, we're suggesting that the township implement the county's target that 10% of all new housing be affordable. We're suggesting that there be a broader range of housing types and densities to meet the anticipated growth demand within the township. We're suggesting that you provide for second units within certain dwelling types, and that we develop that policy regime and express it in the official plan. We're suggesting that discourage the conversion of affordable housing, rental housing stock. We're suggesting that certain land use designations, particularly residential and commercial designations, be revised and refined to look for opportunities to consider mixed-use development, to look at certain corridors and areas where that might be appropriate. And we're suggesting the establishment of new policies surrounding community design to ensure a certain high quality of architectural and public realm design in the township. The second theme, dealing with agriculture. There is an exercise ongoing with the province and with the county to identify prime agricultural lands. This will need to be refined with local input as part of this exercise, and ultimately reflected in the policies and the maps in the official plan. We're suggesting your plan needs to implement the ministry's minimum distance separation, or MDS guidelines, and that they're consistent with provincial policy. There needs to be policies that deal with protecting the agricultural land base and minimizing fragmentation of agricultural areas. The third theme, environment and natural resources. Similar to with agriculture, there is a provincial exercise ongoing to identify a natural heritage system, and that mapping and that exercise with the province and the county will need to be revised as part of your official plan review. And all of the key natural heritage environmental features and functions will need to be identified and afforded various levels of conservation through the policies of the plan, and that is a requirement of provincial policy. There's also a requirement to implement the source protection plans in the policies of your plan, as well as to review policies surrounding natural hazards, things such as flooding hazards. The fourth theme deals with cultural heritage resources. We suggest certainly that the township strengthen its cultural and built heritage policies to ensure that you're reflecting and conserving the unique character and identity of the township through the policies of your plan. There has been discussion of considering a designation of a heritage conservation district, and whether or not you do that, we'll recommend that you bring forward heritage conservation policies in your plan that would enable you to do that, should you so choose. And as with all planning initiatives in the province, we will need to consider the needs and interests of Indigenous communities. The fifth theme deals with community services and amenities. And certainly the plan needs to address parks, open space, recreation trails, and implement the findings and recommendations of your Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The sixth theme deals with economic development. We'll recommend that you identify a land base for jobs, for economic opportunities, and that land base for employment uses be protected for future development, for future economic activity. And that you may want to identify certain strategic lands to be protected for the future, for future economic development. As is required by provincial policy, we will recommend that you strengthen policies around the conversion of employment lands to non-employment uses, to maintain and ultimately in the long term develop that economic or that employment land base for the township. And similarly suggest encouraging modern economic activities, recognizing that the nature of work has changed and that sometimes people work in different environments, sometimes people work from home, and we'll want to make sure the policies of your plan reflect the new economic realities. And finally, in terms of the key themes, infrastructure. We want to make sure you have strong policies about municipal services, hard infrastructure, as well as community services. We're suggesting that there be policies that direct growth, not exclusively, but in large measure to areas that have full municipal services, water and wastewater services. We suggest that you have contemporary policies about stormwater management and green infrastructure. We've recommended that you consider undertaking a transportation master plan in light of changing traffic dynamics and growth that's anticipated in the township over the next 20 years. And that you expand your transportation policies to consider different modes of transportation that may be available and desirable in the township over the course of the next 20 years with the anticipated growth. So a variety of public comments have been received to date. Some have been received as recently as this afternoon or this evening. Those that have been received for a length of time that we've had the opportunity to digest them, we have enunciated some of those here for consideration. And certainly there will be many opportunities in the future for further public input, for further public engagement as we move through this exercise leading to the preparation of an official plan. There have been a number of requests for site-specific redesignation of land. There's been a suggestion that we consider seasonal accommodation seasonal residential. There's been many comments about natural heritage, environmental conservation, and agriculture. There have been a number of varying comments about the Midhurst secondary plan and the boundaries of the secondary plan. There's been requests to review the severance policies of the township. And there have been a number of requests to consider settlement area designations or to consider enlarging settlement areas, particularly on lands in proximity to the city of Barrie. Members of council, I'll conclude my presentation with some commentary on our next steps. We will, with your blessing and endorsement, finalize the growth management strategy and the discussion paper and use that as our authorization to proceed to the next phase of work, if you so choose to authorize staff and by extension us to do that. And by proceeding to the next phase of work, there are a variety of additional technical studies that will be required to support the official plan. And then we would move into the development of a new draft official plan. There would be additional, as I mentioned earlier, opportunities for public engagement and feedback. And ultimately, there would be reviews of the drafts, and that ultimately a document would come forward to a meeting like this and subsequently to this council for review and consideration. My final note is simply to reflect on the fact that the documents that are before you, the draft documents that are before you, have an August 2018 date on them. You may be aware that since that time there have been a number of changes in provincial policy, and there has been a revision to the provincial growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which was released in May of this year. The documents that are before you do not consider recent or ongoing statutory and policy changes at the provincial level, but nevertheless, we will have to consider those changes in provincial policy as we move forward in this exercise. Your Worship, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Chris. So we'll now move to calling forward the people who registered to speak in the order that they registered. And so the first one is, there are 4 people, and then as I said before, those who haven't registered, who wish to come forward and speak, we can deal with that after the 4 speakers speak. So the first person is Mr. Paul Lonergan. If you please come forward. And again, for the audience and council, state your name, address, and look forward to your comments.
My name is Paul Lonergan. I'm with Lonnie Bray Developments, and the property we're here for is 727 Bayfield Street. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and planning staff. Our group is consists of the Remington Group, a premier Canadian developer based out of Markham, Ontario. Our alliance partner is Primacare, and they've over the last 10 years, provided 1,300 care units, as I said, over the last 10 years. Our idea, our proposal to discuss with you, we would be asking for a delegation to council, would include a nursing home, a hospice, retirement homes, senior public community center, life lease apartments, a healthcare clinic, and related services. Remington and Primacare certainly have the horsepower to make a development like this happen. And as I mentioned, we would look forward to a delegation to council at a date in the future where we could get into detailed presentation, outlining all the components. And we would do that with the clerk, Rennie Shapperton. So I don't know what else I can share with you at this time, except for our delegation to council, our team would be here.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Renee Chaperon is right here, and you'll be able to speak with her to arrange for that delegation, and we look forward to that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Next, we have Vanessa Simpson, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name's Vanessa Simpson from Innovative Planning Solutions, here to present on behalf of our client, Sean Mason Homes. The subject lands, as you can see on the slide above, are at 617 St. Vincent Street. You can see them also in the red highlighted on this slide. The lands are designated green lands in the county official plan, rural in the township's official plan, and agricultural in the zoning bylaw. The location of the lands are quite unique and do not resemble that of rural parcels within the township. The lands are within the 1 kilometer greenbelt as per the official plan. Section 24.4 of the official plan restricts new non-farm development within the 1 kilometer of the City of Barrie boundary. The policies are meant to maintain a clear separation between rural and urban land uses to prevent urban sprawl between Barrie and Springwater. The lands front the City of Barrie municipal boundary, St. Vincent Street being the defining boundary. To the south and west is the City of Barrie. To the east is the Barrie Country Club. The property is also flanked by 2 access driveways to the golf course. The property has approximately 105 meters of frontage with an area of 0.6 hectares of land. The site's currently vacant. In spring 2015, Township Council passed a resolution regarding the revised Township Greenbelt policy. This states that Council resolves to maintain the current policy direction with respect to the Springwater Greenbelt buffer in order to protect agricultural farmland by restricting new non-agricultural development, with the exception of minor site-specific infill applications. It is our opinion that 617 St. Vincent Street should be considered for a minor site-specific amendment. As further described in the memo, which I provided to you, you all have a copy of it. Land within the Greenbelt has been evaluated on a number of criteria. This parcel is one of the only parcels of land which possess frontage on a City of Barrie road and have potential access to City Barrie services, identified natural heritage features, is too small of an area for agricultural use, and with the existing development on all sides prevents the possibility of agricultural expansion. All these factors contribute to the uniqueness and minor nature of the lands. A site-specific amendment to the residential use can be accommodated as is appropriate development for this location. The preliminary design concept takes the form of a private seniors community condominium complex, providing a range of dwelling types and sizes that could accommodate a wide range of needs for the future residents. 3 mid-rise buildings are proposed with a series of 2-story townhouses with approximately 148 units. The development would be innovative, providing green design and energy-efficient homes. A looping one-way road network provides a walkable community, increasing green space, and creating a pedestrian-friendly environment. The proposed development provides a compact, high-density built form which contributes to the efficient use of resources, including land and services. High-density built form in the proposed location ensures the protection of existing established built-up neighborhoods. This proposal provides a community benefit of a seniors housing community in South Springwater, where currently there is none. We trust that the memo provided and the details presented tonight will be reviewed and considered through this official plan review as it relates to the Greenbelt policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Chris Evans, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Allen and Deputy Mayor Coghlan and council members and members of staff, and good evening to all members in the audience here today. I would like to speak to the growth management strategy and the official plan review discussion documents. Thank you for the opportunity to do so. I have reviewed them not in great detail, but in enough to get a good feel for them, and would like to share my reactions to the process and the plan. I'll begin with addressing population growth, or discussing that briefly, and then moving on to the ecological impacts, which many of you know is very near and dear to my heart, and climate change, and also about Indigenous engagement in this process. I've been learning about our Indigenous peoples of late, and Truth and Reconciliation, and I'm very moved to express some concerns that from what I've read in this the document so far, I don't see real meaningful engagement of Indigenous peoples or recognition of the impacts that the proposals for the plan would incur upon those peoples. So beginning with population growth, the climate change crisis that we're in now, that we're hearing about daily in the news, and the biodiversity crisis, which we're not quite hearing about daily, but it's closely aligned with the climate change problem, crisis, and we are responsible for it. Our way of being on this planet, our Western culture and society and political system and industries are all creating this climate change crisis. And I find that very disturbing, because I think we're all good people. We don't want to be doing that, and yet we've come to that. Well, I think that's just part of our evolution. It's the way it is, and I don't want to frighten people or scare people. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is we need to learn from that and change our behavior accordingly, and change the way we live and act. And I do not see in these documents any reflection at all of that fact, and the fact that population growth is a major contributor to climate change and to damage to our ecological systems. And I would really implore this council to direct their consultants and the staff at the planning department and within the community to really seriously consider the impacts of climate change that this forecast population growth is going to create, and how we can actually change our official plan to be a plan of zero growth, and try to begin to accommodate in an organized fashion before chaos ensues, what is eventually going to happen if climate change proceeds as science, which we all have used to create climate change. We need to change the way we're doing things. And so the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, they're all being changed. They've been sort of moving along with us a little bit at a very slow pace, but consider that climate change, the UN Convention on Climate Change and on Biodiversity, was in 1992. And here we are now, just realizing that we're in a crisis. It's been forecast, and we're just getting a little bit of a hint of it now, that we're causing it, and it's our population growth. And this plan is actually promoting it, promoting population growth and consumption of energy and impact on the environment, albeit with some of the provisions in the provincial policy statement and the Planning Act say, you know, you've got to preserve ecosystems and you've got to enhance them. Well, this cannot do that. If we're growing, we can't do that. Low impact development can't enhance, it's going to impact. It's low impact, but it's impact. So I really plead with you to, I think we need to engage the Indigenous people, not just to see, that we're violating the treaties or whatever, but they have the wisdom. They lived here for thousands of years on this continent, and in the last 200, we have caused all kinds of extinctions. We have damaged the Indigenous population, their culture, their heritage, their religious beliefs, everything. And it behooves us, we are obligated to take action, and they are willing and able to help us. I've been at several meetings with them, sponsored by Ontario Nature, and it is really encouraging and moving to see how, despite what atrocities we imposed upon these people, they want to help. And I really want to see the next step. I know that I was talking to Brent earlier this evening, and part of what's going to happen, of course, is the new provincial policy statement has to be considered. But I really think that we are in a position here in Springwater Township with that jewel of natural heritage, of ecological system, of the Minising wetlands that is completely dependent upon what happens upstream. Willow Creek feeds directly into, and its watershed covers our township almost completely. And that feeds into the Minising wetlands. And if we damage that further, we're continually damaging it. We need to focus our attention not on growing, but on remediating and restructuring our infrastructure so that we can still live and minimize our damage and impact on the environment and on climate change, not grow. If we grow, we are going to make even more damage, and those dire forecasts that we're hearing on the news, and the head of the UN Council on Climate Change just said today, we have to leave all of that fossil fuel in the ground. That's where it belongs. And our Indigenous people will tell you that that water that's in the ground, that is sacred water. We have to leave it there. We are using it for our drinking water. I drink it every day. I flush the toilet with it. My neighbors irrigate their lawns with it. We need to leave it there because our removal of it is damaging the ecosystem. And the scientific evidence of that is things like the Hines Emerald dragonfly in the Minising wetlands. The only place that is currently known in Canada is Minising wetlands. Why is that? I recently wrote to the Environment and Climate Change Canada on their recovery strategy because they felt that the Hines Emerald was probably ecologically, historically precarious prior to Western European settlement of this area. And they came to that conclusion with absolutely no supporting evidence. And I researched it, and I came to the conclusion that it was widespread in Ontario. It was not at all ecologically precarious. And so what it's telling us, the situation of the Hines Emerald dragonfly, what is that? It's telling us is that what we are doing is destroying our environment. The UN's telling us that. All of our scientists are telling us that. We need to pay attention and start to take action now. And I think we have the opportunity to have zero growth of our population and to manage our decline in population. The population we have now globally is not sustainable by the planet. That is what the science is telling us. The science is also telling us that if we don't voluntarily just stop having babies and so on to reduce our population, that ultimately we're going to run out of food. And it's going to decline for us. It's going to be chaotic. Climate change is going to be chaotic. And we have an opportunity now, I believe. I have faith in human beings, my fellow citizens, my elected council, to take action now to make that change. Thank you very much. Thank you for the work you do. I really appreciate it. And for the work the consultant has done for us. You know, I find it's completely missing on this, but that's the part of the system. That's the system we're in. That is the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the major growth plan, the Places to Grow Act, and the Planning Act. Those things are all what contribute to that. And our whole society, everything about it, the industry, commercialism, you know, consumerism, that's why we're where we are. But we can recognize that and we can change. And I want to be part of that change, and I want to help you do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ken Rounds.
Your Worship, Mayor, Councillors, I'm excited to be here tonight. So what I'd like to just ask a few questions about, maybe give a little background. I think really what I wanted to do is just highlight the agricultural piece. And agriculture represents a fairly significant role in this municipality. I didn't see a lot on Chris's presentation that really addressed agriculture other than protecting it. But what I'm talking to you tonight about is really about the tourism piece of it. In the provincial policy statement in 2014, they actually defined agriculture, they expanded agriculture to include value-added agriculture, agritourism, agri-experience, all kinds of components that are around value-added. And the reason they did that is because the reality in agriculture is, if you have an agricultural background, you probably notice that farms either get very large, because you need to for sort of the economics of making it viable, or they stay small and medium sized, but they need value added. Much like Chris did mention, I think his words were, we need to be talking about the new realities, and he talked about home-based businesses. So I think I want to talk about the new realities in agriculture. So new realities are, if people want to stay on farms, and they don't want to grow to 1,000 acres or 1,500 acres, they need to find other options. And the best option to do that is to look at value-added agriculture. So we have a business called Rounds Ranch. Some of you have heard of it. We are sort of, I would say, one of the leaders in this community and in the province. We were the first one in the province to open a corn maze. We were one of the first ones in the province to have a farm market. And I just want to highlight a few things that we've experienced, and I want you to sort of take this into consideration as you're thinking about phase 2. I don't think we're quite ready for phase 2 yet, because I'd like to see a little bit more done on phase 1 in terms of addressing this and defining what exactly agricultural tourism looks like in this municipality. Because I think, as I listened to Chris, it was almost void of agricultural tourism, and that I'm not really impressed with that. Just a little background. We were asked to participate in a presentation from Simcoe County last year. They had rolled out a fairly massive survey looking at 165 different agricultural ventures, and some of you have seen this. And they actually indicated that close to 50% of all the farmers who were surveyed had some form of direct farm sales. Some component of agricultural tourism was part of their business. And if you think of that, that's a new reality. That's not the way agriculture used to work. We've run into a couple issues in the last couple years, and they actually asked me a question when they presented the survey. They asked me a question, what were their words? Would I say that Springwater Township is friendly to agricultural, or is it friendly to tourism? And I had to say no. Specifically in 2018, we were told by the staff that if we did not we've been doing weddings for the last 5 years, but because they decided to do a new special occasions permit and tie the liquor licenses in with the township so that there could be a fee paid to the township, suddenly we were told that they could sue us or shut us down or charge us for $50,000 if we didn't step up and do some upgrades. So we spent about $25,000 in 2018 just to do some upgrades on our farm. Some needed to be done, I agree, but it was just interesting that we be threatened with a $50,000 fine. I thought, that's not really conducive to agricultural tourism. This year, we opened a new water slide. We got a permit from the director of, I forget, what's the fill? People that authorize the fill to be brought in. I can't remember what the name of the, was that? Yeah, Public Works, yeah. So we got a permit to bring in the fill. So for 2 years, we were building a slide. And we opened it this year, and we were open for about 12 days before we got a letter threatening, a legal letter threatening cease and desist in 4 days, or we're going to shut you down and pursue legal action. And it really came down to the fact that the municipality doesn't have a grid for agriculture and tourism in the same box. So we've been doing tourism, we've been rezoned 3 times already. Now we're in the process of spending another $25,000 or $30,000 to be rezoned again and have a site-specific plan so that we can actually open our water slide. So I think I really wanted to just sort of challenge the council to really elevate and highlight. Agricultural tourism is really, it's a reality that needs to be addressed. And you know what, we're not, we have been, and I'm willing to work with the people here, and I work with Brent, and we're not, it's not that we're opposed to spending the money, but it's got to be equal playing ground, because we deal with lots and lots of agricultural tourism businesses in the province. Unfortunately, we're one of the few municipalities that gets these extra charges. We've got some very good friends in agricultural tourism that don't face this. So here's what would have happened. If the official plan would have been updated, even according to the 2014 policy statement where agriculture and tourism are defined in the same box, we would not be spending the money we're spending now. It would be totally not even happening. So I think my request for you, take time, just take consideration on the agricultural side, agricultural tourism specifically, and really ask yourself the question, are we a tourism-friendly municipality? Do we want to be? Are we one? Because we're talking about, as a provincial government, about getting rid of red tape. We're talking about making sure that we've got recreation happening in these rural areas. It's been in the works for a long time. And so we need to make sure that as a municipality that we can stand proud and say, hey, we're going to make that happen here. All right?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else in the audience who has not registered who would like to come forward? Yes, come forward, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I feel there's a couple of things that I should say, although I wasn't prepared to say anything tonight.
Can you start by saying your name and address, please?
For sure. David Strawn, and 47 Finlay Mill Road in Midhurst. I think it does need to be said that the last 2 speakers spoke a lot of truth. We are doing a lot of damage to the ecology and to the planet in general, but I think that this whole Midhurst secondary plan and official plan is based on a misleading supposition, and that is it's assumed, because of what people have said in terms of consulting with the community and so on, it's assumed that the community is in favour of doubling the population of Springwater in 12 years, which is what our charts are telling us today. Let's question that for a second, because do we really believe that the community wants twice the traffic in Springwater Township in the next 12 years? And by the way, it'll be 9 times the traffic in Midhurst, because something like 2/3 of that growth is scheduled to go to Midhurst. Do we really believe that Springwater wants their taxes to increase in the same way that Barrie taxes have increased in the last 5 years? You can check the records there and look at the traffic in Barrie as well. Are we really under some kind of false illusion that the township, in terms of the community and the population, has anything at all to benefit from doubling the population of Springwater in 12 years? I would suggest that they don't. I suggest that you'd get a lot more protests if people were really aware of what was happening, because people are busy, they're going about their business, they haven't got time to come here. It's true that this particular meeting was published in accordance with the regulations, but at the same time, this has been dragging on since 2008. I think people are a bit jaded with showing up here and saying the same things, being consulted, but it's a checkbox. Nobody's ever really changed the plan at all by speaking up here. And I think they're very, very frustrated, and I think there's nothing to be gained by pursuing this crazy project. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at the farms we were talking about just now. There are 746 hectares of Prime 1 and Class 1 and Class 2 farmland right here in Midhurst that the development would take over completely. There's nothing in the new development proposed so far that isn't on Class 1 or Class 2 farmland. So that's a business we're going to lose in Springwater Township. It's a profitable business and has spin-offs as well, obviously. So I think that there's a very misleading supposition that we need to question, that do people want this plan and is there a benefit for it? Because I would suggest, from what I know about it, that there's nothing to be gained whatsoever, only disadvantages. I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions, or...
No, we're going to have comments and questions once all the speakers are finished.
Okay. Thank you for the chance to speak.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward? Okay, I'll turn it to Chris and Director Spagno first, just to make any general responses or comments on the presentations, and then I'll open it up to council. First of all, maybe you just review what's going to happen with respect to this information that we received tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So as I mentioned earlier before the presentation, this really does represent the start off of the process from a statutory planning act perspective. What will happen from this point on is comments received in writing, comments received through email, and comments received here verbally will be considered by Chris Terrell and Greg Bender from WSP, along with staff. And what will have to happen is the discussion paper will have to be reviewed to consider those comments, consider the policies that are in place, as mentioned in Mr. Terrell's presentation, and be updated and brought back to council for consideration and endorsement to finalize both the discussion paper and the growth management strategy. Moving from that point on, we would move into what could be considered as phase 2 of the process, whereby there would be the need to complete the background studies that were referenced within the presentation tonight to form the backing and the information behind the drafting of the policy for the official plan. Moving through that process, there will be a series of information sessions, workshops, similar to what has occurred to date to get to this point, and that will also inform those background studies and the policies that would be drafted through the official plan, through this official plan process. From the perspective of tonight, staff have received the written comments. We do have an ongoing list of commenters. That has all been itemized and has all been provided to WSP. So we do have those comments. And really, I think it's a matter of taking those comments back and reviewing them and seeing how they fit in the context of the work that's been completed to date to bring something back to council for consideration, most likely in 2020.
Thank you. Okay, I'll turn to council to see whether there are any comments about the official plan process or comments about tonight. Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and thank you people for coming. Thank you all for coming as well, too. It's nice to see the turnout. This has been ongoing since last August of 2018. So we do a little history. Last in October of 2018, we went to the polls, and really 2018 is pretty much done over by the time you've had a new council come in and get their feet wet. And yet, I feel this new official plan, which is it's like the blueprint of our township. We haven't, as a council, had you guys sit here and give us a more hands-on, in-depth talk about, let us tell you what we're thinking. We do the talk and you do the writing, and take that away. I welcome Ken and Geraldine Rounds, very respected business people in the agritourism industry, and he's absolutely right. And we need more people like him, more people in the agricultural industry of all sectors to take a bigger part of this. I feel like it's from a distance. Like you're down there, and next thing you know, we're going to be adopting an official plan. I can't accept that, and I won't accept that. We're doing a budget right now, which, you know, we're a $44 million a year township. And we got our staff sitting right there. We're going through it line by line. And we're talking about it. We're telling you what we think. And we vote on it as a council. And that's what I want to see with this. This is the blueprint. This is where we're going to go back, and I have my fingerprints on this. I don't have anything on this. It's all from a distance. And Mr. Rounds is right. There's a lot of good discussion here. And Mayor Allen, we need to bring these back, have more workshops, and give our ideas and what we think, and let them write it down. And then they can tell us why we're wrong. That's what I think. We're elected officials. We have the right to put that in there. Not write it down and hand it off. Bring them up here, sit them here, so we can talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, certainly as we get deeper into the process, public consultation is important, such as tonight, but we will be having more workshops to get into more detail, peel back the onion, express our views, and so that's all part of the process, which is vital. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor, and as many residents will know, I've supported the residents of Springwater who are opposed to the mega development plan for the southern part of our township. The province, county have, in my view, taken over the municipality's authority to be able to control development in our municipality. Unfortunately, because of that, we do have to come up with some kind of a plan on how we're going to manage it going forward. If there was a way to vote for it and stop the mega development, I would do that. I've done it in the past, and I can understand why residents are frustrated because they've come to council over the years since I've been on council. There's been presentations. There's been all kinds of opposition, but nothing's changed. So I understand your frustration, but I do believe that if we have no control, we have to do something to try to manage it.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just want to comment on Mr. Ken Rounds. I've had conversation with him. I got a bit of background in the situation there and looked into the agro-tourism aspect of it. And what I came away from at that time was that it seemed to me that our current status tends to really try and pigeonhole things. And I would suggest that because of that is the reason why Mr. Rounds has had to make so many different zoning applications And I, for one, think that maybe there's too much pigeonholing. It should be maybe somewhat a little bit broader, and that's something that I would like to see going forward, in particular for the smaller operators who are looking to do exactly what Mr. Ken Rounds has mentioned here. They're trying to, Mr. Rounds, and research some other agritourism facilities. It seemed to me that he was placed at a disadvantage just because of the way our policies were written. So I would really like to see that broadened up in the future.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, this has certainly been very valuable. Thank you for attending the public meeting under Section 26(3) and 4 of the Planning Act for Springwater Official Plan Review. Anyone receiving notice of this public meeting will continue to receive further notices regarding this matter. If you do not receive notice and would like to receive a copy of further information, please leave your name and address with the recording secretary at the back, or make a written request to the clerk of the Township of Springwater. Can I have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Moore, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, that the public meeting of council held under sections 26(3) and 4 of the Planning Act for the official plan review now adjourned at 8:06 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. And a mover and seconder to confirm and adopt the proceedings. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Chapman. That bylaw 219-096 to confirm. Councillor Ritchie? Councillor Gabel? Your attention, please. That bylaw 219-096 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on December 5th, 2019, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. And a mover and seconder to adjourn the meeting. Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Cabral. That the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 8:07 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on December 18, 2019, 6:30 p.m. in council chambers at Min Center in Minnesing. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you again. We will be around here for further discussion, the staff or ourselves. So thanks for coming out, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a good holiday season.